took a mandate to start what they term as major cities unit. And the whole idea about the major cities unit, which sits in Canberra, not in the cities, capital cities, is to establish the long-term vision and where the center or the federal government is mandating at an international level, for example, climate change. So what we saw, the gap when dealing the issue at the state or the city level was too wide and there was not a connected thread. Cities were doing their own thing, their own vision, 20 years, 30 years. We have got even strategy for 2050 strategy. Sydney has got 2030 vision strategy. But what we thought, there was a major gaps in connecting the cities. And the government in 2008 and 9 came up with the major cities unit, the information and the methodology and the law, which in fact controls this unit, is there on site. If you go on aus.gov.au and type in major cities unit, I think it's very similar to what you just described. And there is a proper research, which within the major cities unit, there's a unit which is dedicated to the research. The key thing, I think, where you are going to face major challenge is establishing a good data bank. Because what's happening now, our observation with number of Indian cities, is the decision making. Once you have to make a decision, and when you're looking at a credible data, that's a lag. That's a big lag. As a chairperson for the committee and establishing some of these data banks, I think that must have been a tremendous task. But how do you transfer some of this data for the decision makers to make an informed decision? That's the gap which still exists. And in that regard, I refer to your slide, ma'am, which was your slide number 13, where you spoke about the share of the budget allocated 51% to the roads and stuff, which I saw you had huge numbers on the tangible assets, building up the tangible assets, road infrastructure, waste management, water supply. But when I look at your figure in capacity building, which we term in academic sense is intangible, 0.9 lakh crores, to me that seems at international level substantially well below the line which it should be. Because that intangible is your best asset at this point of time before you start even building up the tangible assets. Because the value proposition, both in Brazil and in South Africa, what we studied, is coming out of enforcing the intangible in the beginning and then making a value proposition on your built assets. So I think that's something with our experience and as an academic, I can say that figure. One thing I have to congratulate you, Dr. Ahluwalia, that you at least took the step to put that figure. I struggled in the last 6 years to find out, tell me what's the capacity building really defines into. The second outcome of that report, when Mr. Baliga, you addressed very clearly that I see a value by having a research and action-oriented research to my organization. To me, that cause and effect is already happening on the same table. Yes, it's happening in 2011 or 12, I heard your first report, and I was most impressed to see someone is actually mentioning setting up 5 Indian Institute of Urban Management. I don't know how that progress is going, but at least the word started. You clarified or confirmed my hypothesis that you are really looking at value addition by action-oriented research, but still the data is one thing which worries me for informed decision making. But there are precedents. I mean, major cities unit within Australian government could provide some linkages or at least frameworks for that. Thank you.
If I may just say here, there is a tremendous need for capacity, but there is not much demand for capacity, is what we were told. That even when under the JNNURM, they had said that 5% of the funds could be utilized for capacity, there was no takers. So you have to really build the awareness for the importance of capacity. I think that's coming now, as some examples are emerging, people want to know, if you go to a solid waste person, he'll tell you the 4 or 5 companies, that are working where. They all go, talk to the people, look at the plans that they've done, then see whether it's workable in there. So they're building their own capacity. Now, the truth is that those who were doing technical oversight over these projects also had no capacity. And I've said this to the Ministry of Urban Development. I've said this in front of the Secretary and the Minister. Because, the mere fact that you are Secretary Urban Development doesn't mean that you know how to evaluate a DPR. And, for a long time, we've just gone along in this manner that, with seniority comes wisdom. And but these are very technical areas now. These are high-tech, scientific areas, really, in which we are going to be putting our money and getting private sector to put their money. So the truth is that you are right that the figure there is very little, and this was supposed to be, we were told also for, those pre-feasibility studies, they said you should call that as part of capacity building, otherwise this money will never be used. In the JNNU RM2, they set up a group. I was there with Mr. Arun Maira and Mr. Ramachandran, and the minister himself took several meetings. But I think we've now recognized that we need to build capacity. But I don't think there is a real, in order to build capacity, you have to first recognize that you don't know, right? Like I go around telling everybody that this greatness of urban expert thing has been thrust upon me because I was made chairperson, and I'm learning constantly from every seminar that I give where if I'm introduced as an expert, I, cringe because I know every person sitting there knows much more than I do. But, you have to have, commitment to a sector for 10 years to have that feeling that you have to prove something, so you have to learn something. Now, if you have a system in which the real decision makers are going to fly in and fly out, and if they don't recognize that you need technical cells, then, what's the point of just setting aside funding for it? So that is what we are working on, slowly and steadily at every level, to convince these people. At least one good thing, is happening today, which I didn't even see happening 2-3 years ago, when NIUA and the ministry had a seminar on a 2-day seminar. They actually got private companies who were part of PPPs to come and make a presentation. Now, they may have their own interests. They may not show everything, but they are forced to show something, and there are enough intelligent persons sitting around the table asking them questions. Through that, you learn something. So we are really building capacity in this kind of multiple, very Hindu manner, very inclusive. And it's not just about money, it's about attitude. And I think that is, I see it changing, but it has a long way to go.
Madam, we have to institutions and provisions which already exist. For example, on capacity building, if we see the national training strategy, this is on the website of DOPT, which was finalized last year, February, 2.5% of the budget of any government organization should be devoted to capacity building. So even for urban local bodies, if we see that 1.5% of GDP is their total budget, 2.5% of that is huge money, which can be made available. But we have to bring awareness, sensitize them, handhold them, and nurture them to take initiatives towards capacity building. For example, city development plan. JNNURM has been focusing on larger cities, 100 or 110 or whatever. But what about other 7,000 plus towns? Very few of them, or I will say none of them, has CDP. So, although the district planning committees and metropolitan planning committees were supposed to consolidate development plans prepared by local bodies. So, those provisions are there. there is a need to focus on them and try to do something, as Chairman Hatko said, from bottom-up side. And for this, I would congratulate first ICRIER for the HUDCO chair. Because I have been involved in one way or other since beginning of HUDCO chair system. And there is enormous opportunity and challenge in the NCR region, which needs to be tapped. First of all, NCR Planning Board is now preparing detailed plan. Again, they are preparing 2020 and further. And Madam, you are, I think, also involved in some of their working groups. No. So they have 5-6 working groups. I am a member in one of them. So they are now preparing detailed plan for NCR, all the towns. So that office is very hand-holding. This very close from this office. We can, you can just tap their thinking and resources, which is now coming. And second, you rightly said about water and sanitation. 24%, maybe I don't know whether climate change aspect is covered in this or not. If you add that, then it becomes further large amount. And there was a study by World Bank here for India last year, which says that if we bring adequacy in water and sanitation, we can have another 6.4% of GDP. Out of that, 2/3 is in urban areas. So we can imagine the huge money is lying in the adequacy of water and sanitation alone. So focusing that in Delhi would be very an important task. And as your presentation said, 25% live in slums. That is okay. But in addition to that, there are unauthorized colonies, which may be another 25%. So the real problem in Delhi is like Mumbai. If you see the slums and unauthorized colonies and urban villages, together it would be about 60 to 65% of total Delhi's population. So there is a need to focus on water, sanitation and other services in this aspect, in this chunk of population and areas. And third, lastly, I would like to add is the property tax. This 13th Finance Commission said another 22,000 to 32,000 crore can be generated, provided if collection and coverage is improved. And Delhi is no better, even worse. If you go to deposit your property tax in Delhi, and if you are not sure how much you have deposited earlier, you will never come to know. They say that you bring your receipts earlier, then we will tell you how much you have paid. That is the system of information in Delhi. So property tax is one area where all the 3 municipal corporations can benefit substantially, provided Delhi thinks for the changes in the property tax system and improvement in the... So I think these are the points where this chair can focus.
So property tax, you're absolutely right. You know, they somehow stop at GIS. They say we've done GIS mapping. Then the fact that you have to get your registers to match with that, you know, that compatibility exercise has not been done. And then the question of, you know, collection efficiency and all.
I paid my property tax. I have a house in Bangalore from Delhi, online. But in Delhi, to pay my water tax, somebody has to go there personally and pay it. I can't even pay online. So it's so sad. No. At least last month I could not pay. I tried.
So this one you can try.
Delhi Jal Board. Okay.
Yesterday I paid, that's why I'm saying.
Good. Last month I couldn't pay that. Just to add on what Professor Pandey said about the water and sanitation. Of course, requirement of roads is huge, ma'am. Unfortunately, with my experience in local bodies, our corporators and contractors will be too happy to do the road. When it comes to water supply and drainage, there are hardly any capacity. I think in your report also, maybe in your recommendation, the priority should be given for water and sanitation first, and then maybe to the roads. And fortunately, ma'am, 2 states have taken a big lead. Of course, Tamil Nadu has already done it. Recently, Punjab and Madhya Pradesh have now said that all the local bodies will get whatever is the standard norm, maybe 110 LPD of water. and they have taken loan from us. We have sanctioned, I think, about 2,000 crores to Punjab and another 2,000 crores to Madhya Pradesh. Here the model is slightly different. In Madhya Pradesh, only 25% is given as grant to the local body. Other 75% they have to borrow from HUDCO or any other financing institution we have sanctioned. And out of that 75%, 25% of the loan has to be repaid by the local body. Remaining is repaid by the state government. This 25% has to be again through water rate. So they have to charge the water rate. So some reforms are going on. And even in Punjab, of course, they are deducting the urban local body grants at the state level, and then they are repaying the money to us. But there again, they have said every town in Punjab will get the minimum water supply from the schemes. And I think in the next 5 years, we'll see that these two states will go ahead as far as water supply is concerned.
In Mumbai, Gorai project, sanitary landfill site, they spent about 69 crore on development of the plant, and they got carbon credit worth rupees 80 crore. So there is a cash interest.
Those were the times when carbon credits have better priced. I think now the price is not so good, but Gorai really cashed out big time. Yeah. You wanted to say something?
There's something on capacity building. I mean, this area which is town planning and capacity building, and something. One point which I wanted to raise, or my suggestions on this, is that when we talk about capacity building, when we really look at the emerging or the changing role of urban local body, because they have to make the plans. So they really lack that capacity to make the plans, because there is no planner. In many cases, there is no planner in order to make the plans. Second is, so that was one point which they seriously lack in capacity, and that's how, though we know that Constitutional Amendment Act says that urban local body has to plan, but they are not in a position to do the planning. Second is this point of development, taking out a city's needs. There was this exercise which SPA is doing with other consultants on local area planning, ward level planning for various, from the grassroots level. One is trying to take out the needs. What is the need of a city? If we really look at that, we are doing for MCD. We are trying to see that each ward, what is that ward level need, and how does it aggregate to the city's need. So when it's supposed to be a participatory process, but when we really looked at that participatory, when we went to the councillors, when we tried to have it a participatory process, it didn't work out, because that capacity building is not there at that level also. So councillors level also, I mean, nobody is interested to have that participatory, though we have put it on the website, though we have tried to ensure that we have had a meeting with the councillors, we have had a meeting with a sort of a public meeting, but really nobody is capable, I would say, or nobody is interested enough to come out. These are the real life problems which we faced when we tried to do these ward level plans, which is from the grassroots level we are trying to bring up to what you call as which Mr. Valigar was saying, that the city level needs. If we have to develop a city level needs, if we come up from that ward level, then also there are stumbling blocks in that. So that is one point. Second is that another point which I wanted to say is that when we talk of these areas, like somewhere in that you have mentioned that about peripheral areas are going to grow and the city. So what I would say that in our cities, that part of we are talking of governance, we are talking of investments, but somewhere that policies at the city level, I mean, what should be our policy with our peri-urban areas, peripheral areas? We don't, I mean, we really have not put across. Second is the point, another point is that regarding the TDR, which Dr. Ahluwalia was mentioning, the TDR, now if it has to be a receiving zone, if it's a sending zone, fine. If it has to be a receiving zone, there has to be some thresholds to that receiving zone. So then what is the policy for that? So our city city level, I mean, we are talking at the end when we are talking, when coming to spend the money, but then what is a policy regarding the city level? I mean, are we, because ultimately that disconnect between policy to plan to projects, I think brings about a lot of problems in situ, because somewhere, whatever plan we have, that somewhere the policy should be there, that yes, this is our city level policy, and we are accordingly working from policy to plan, and then we are trying to projectize. So this sort of, I think, maybe some thoughts to the entire.
As far as planners in the local bodies are concerned, because we ourselves studied the urban local bodies, and we do realize, ma'am, as you suggested, that municipal cadres should be built. I think within the cadres, if the planners' positions come up in each of the local bodies, I think that's the need of the hour. Because if we realize that 74th Constitutional Amendment Act has already given the planning as a function to the local bodies, but in reality, how many places which we find that planning actually has come to the local body? It hasn't been transferred. Like whether we take up the example of Kanpur or Ahmedabad or Hyderabad, it's everywhere the development authority which were existing pre this amendment are still existing. So if we really want to have planning as a function to the local bodies, then we should also have the capacities of the people to do it. That's one part. Secondly, if we are thinking of raising the own revenues, the way it's been shown in the report, that 0.5 to 1.5, what are the steps which we can really do for that? And what can we learn from best practices or the practices which are happening in different states? Like, for example, if we compare like a state with Delhi and NCR, like Haryana has done it in a good way, in the sense that even if a particular plot of land is there for residential land use, and while giving the, converting it to the freehold, like the person who comes and assesses the property sees that even if something is extra has been done, they cap that, they put a cost to it, and they charge to the individual household. So even from residential households, like if we compare to Delhi, like how many people have already covered the balconies and all that, but how many people have paid extra money before getting the freehold, converting from leasehold to freeholds, like capturing from the individual properties to the because that's a large, huge chunk of the money which can be generated each property-wise. Secondly, vacant land charges, which is stated, like when we were studying the Punjab, Patiala basically, just last year along with the students, I'm from School of Planning and Architecture and I'm a planner by profession and currently working as a faculty in Regional Planning Department over there. What we do realize that authority was having too much vacant land, which wasn't put to the use of, which we can say the usefulness of that land wasn't realized over a period of time. And when we see their finance, then the financing, they were under debt because they were not having money, and they haven't, like for them, capitalization out of land was only through selling it. But if you have sold it, that's one point of time revenue. It's not a continuous revenue. But if you put it for a meaningful use, then you will have continuous revenue. So I think realization of like GIS can be a big help, that we can map the, like we have already done it, like in Hyderabad case, they are doing it as far as the unit area method is concerned, and they are even tapping G+1, G+2, and for each of the area they calculated. And it's a good way they have done it, so if we can implement it. Like if we see the NCR, like because you would like to go there in a big way, example of Rohini, how much big chunk of land since the planning, master plan which happened earlier and the revised master plan, but it still we realize that so much capital land has been remained vacant. And what kind of charges do we have? Like in Haryana, we know that earlier they said that within 10 years, if you don't build, you have to pay the vacant land charges. Now they have reduced it to 5 years. Last what I heard is that even 2 years. So if you have purchased a plot from the development authorities, then you have to pay for keeping it vacant. So that means that more and more land which you have planned, like which planners planned, is coming back for uses. And it's not lying vacant, because vacant land is only giving the revenue to the owner and not to the authorities. And that's one point. And also, like, if we compare development authorities with ULBs, isn't it that most of the earnings is with ULB, with the development authorities? Like, because land as an asset, most of it is under development authorities, and earning, like even by development of the land and selling it off, is the development authority which is earning. The money, if it's generated, it's a state, this thing resource, so it will go back to the state. But then For example, if we take the Kanpur's example, Kanpur's KDA, Kanpur Development Authority is there, which does the planning, it does the implementation. There is a ULB which has the powers to do the capacity building and all that, but it doesn't have those people whom he can build a capacity. On the other hand side, monetary things, whatever comes up, it comes to the KDA. It doesn't get transferred though. So can we work out a mechanism through which, as our amendment says, that powers has to be given to local bodies, at least land as a resource, if it's not there with them, from where will they generate the resources? Then, like if we take up the CDPs, city development plans, because they have already done the great exercise in the sense that when sir was telling that we don't have the data thing with us, but with the CDPs we have generated lots and lots of data. Like I was involved personally managing the project for Kanpur to prepare the city development plan, so I have first-hand exercise. We went to each and every office, we sent the people, we collected the data, and that city development plan itself has all the documentation of the data set which existed, and it has a trend data also. So almost like 10 years, 15 years data is there. It's there in digitized format, it's there on the JNNURM website. Only thing where we lacked was that if we were involved in preparation of the plan, but integration of it with the master plan, we did consider at the time of doing it, but that integration somehow lacks. And especially when we convert CDPs to DPRs also, then also like the people who got involved in the detailed project reports, the people who prepared that plan were nowhere in the site over there. So that means the foresight which we saw at the time of preparation of the plan, while implementing it, I personally, if I see that city, it got lost out. Like we worked intensively to work out pro-poor plan, especially for the places where like we would like to see inclusive planning, but now down the line, like it was done in 2007, now 2013, if we see, ground realities are same as it was there when we prepared the plan. So that was one of the things. Thanks a lot.
We had SPA, as part of SPA, we had also worked out on a research study on alternative